Hey everybody, Chris here again. Welcome back to the channel. Always good to have you with us. So last time we talked about OS 2, we talked about version 2.1, and I showed you some of the features that were available in 2.1. Today, I'm going to take you through how I set up that installation of OS 2. It was not easy, but it was definitely a learning experience. So, as opposed to doing this on real hardware, we're actually going to use a virtual machine. Let's jump right to it. All right, here we go. OS 2 2.1 in a virtual machine. First of all, you can see on the right-hand side of the screen that I have a series of directions, and these directions are also available in my Git repository, and there will be a link to them in the description below. Now let's talk about the various items to locate. First of all, you're going to want Oracle VM VirtualBox, ideally version 5.1.38. However, that version will not install under Windows 10, so we're probably not going to be able to go with that for most folks. Perhaps it would work under Windows 7 or Windows 8.1. I have not tried it. Nonetheless, the downside of not using that version is that sound is not going to work, but it is what it is. So if you're using Windows 8.1, Windows 7, perhaps you can download and install this version without any penalty. That said, since we are using Windows 10, I recommend going with version 6.0.18. Newer versions may result in trap errors when you go to install OS 2 or use OS 2. To locate older versions of VirtualBox, you can go to the website and go to the download section. You can scroll down to see the older builds, and from there we can find, for example, the 6.1 series, and we should be able to find builds here. However, in this case, we're actually interested in the 6.0 series. So if I go here, we can then find 6.0.18 and download it for Windows hosts. Next up is WinImage, which we will be using to create disks and to extract files from disks. Next up, we're going to need a bootable DOS disk. I recommend grabbing this DOS 622 bootable ISO from allbootdisks.com. Next up, you're going to need your Microsoft Windows 3.1 installation disks. Do not use installation disks for Windows for Workgroups 3.11. I tried it and it did not work in OS 2. The WinOS 2 will not work with it. There may be a way around it, but I think it has to do with networking. Next up, we're going to locate IBM MPTS, and rather than using your original installation disks, we're better off using the FixPack version. So there's an FTP link for that. You can go here and click on the files one by one and download them until you have all of them. Next, you're going to want to locate your copy of IBM TCP/IP 2.0 for OS 2, as well as your copy of IBM LAN Server 3.0, your IBM OS 2 2.1 installation CD. If you have disks, the directions will be a little bit different. Hopefully you can fill in the gaps or ask questions in the comments, and I'll do my best to assist. Also, you will also need an installation CD for OS 2 Warp 3.0 Connect. We're actually going to be pulling IBM Pure from this CD to install an OS 2 2.1 to get file sharing access working for accessing other servers. And also we need this AMD PCNet driver for VirtualBox, which we can find by going to this link in WinWorld. That's your list of items to locate for this installation. Moving along, we'll look at the installations list. 2 items to install on your host operating system. Those would be Oracle VM VirtualBox and WinImage. I won't be covering installation of these products today since I already have them installed. Let's move on and create a virtual machine. To do that, I'm going to launch VirtualBox. And what we're going to do is create a new virtual machine. And since I have a lot of these, I probably better differentiate it. We'll call it OS 2 2.1. Next, memory size of 32 megabytes. Next, create a virtual hard disk. Now, create, make it a VMDK file. Next, dynamically allocated. Next, and let's go with 500 megabytes. That should be plenty for what we're trying to do. Let's just clear this box out, type 500 MB, create. Perfect. Now there's a few other little things that we have to do. to ensure that our settings are proper. And that's going to entail going up here to the settings on the virtual machine, going down to the network, and changing the adapter type to be bridged, and bridge with your favorite card. Be it a wireless card, be it a wired card, it doesn't matter. Great. Another thing we're going to do under settings is turn off the nested paging under the System and then Acceleration tab. Not required, but I'm going to do it anyway just to be safe. Then we'll click OK. Great. With this, we are ready to launch the virtual machine and begin the installation. I'm going to come over to my virtual machine here and click the Start button. And we need to pop a boot disk into the drive. So we can navigate over here to where I have my boot disk and double click. Now we'll press Start. Let me make this a little bigger so you can see it. That should do. So the first thing we need to do is run fdisk and choose 1 to create a partition, 1 to create a primary DOS partition, Y to make it the max size possible, and then press the any key. System reboots. Now we can format our new hard drive. Format C:/S and yes to confirm all data loss. Perfect. Now we're going to copy Xcopy to drive C. Perfect. And now what we're going to actually do is change the drive C. And I'm going to swap out the boot ISO for the OS2 2.1 installation ISO. Great. Now what we're going to do is copy some files off of it. The first file we're going to copy is this OS2 se20.src file to the root of drive C. And what that does is it tells OS2 where to look for its installation files. And by doing this, we can avoid having to use a floppy drive. So I'm going to cheat just a little bit here so I can get a listing of the name. So copy OS2 se20.src to drive C. Done. And now we can go back to drive C and we're going to say xcopy/s/e R drive /OS2 se21 to C drive OS2 se21. And we'll say D to specify directory and the files will copy. All right, now when done, it's going to get a little angry because it's going to want to load command com and we took the boot ISO out. So let's just go ahead at this point and we can flip it back in if we want. Otherwise, we can just proceed. And actually, at this point, since we're done with what we need to do, we can just go ahead and remove the OS2 installation ISO from the drive, and I can just use the host key, which is Control for me, and R to reboot the virtual machine. Perfect. Great. Next up, we're going to install Windows 3.1. So I'm going to go ahead and pop the first disk into the drive. We'll go to A:, type setup, enter. Now we need to put in disk 2. Enter. Now we get to put our name in and our company if we desire. Enter to continue again. Now we need to put in disk 3. I bet you know what happens next. That's right. We put in disk 4. And then we put in disk 5. And I'm going to leave this small screen because, as you can see, these copy so fast that there's really no sense in moving it back to a bigger screen. Hopefully you can see it okay. If not, I do apologize. And finally, we're going to do disk 6. Barely got a word in edgewise. All right. Next up, we're just going to choose No Printer Attached and click Install. And we're going to skip the tutorial. Return to MS-DOS. Let's remove that disk. And I think at this point we can actually put the OS2 disk in. So we'll go ahead and perform those steps. Let's scroll down a little bit to catch up. Perfect. Okay. So yes, at this point we are going to insert disk 0 of the OS2 installation into the drive. However, it's on the ISO and we need to extract it. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to where I have my files. And I'm going to locate the ISO and double click on it, and it's going to open in WinImage. And now I need to go and find these images. If I go to disk imgs OS2 3.5, we're going to extract disk 0 and 1 and put them in a convenient place. I'm just going to drag them to the desktop. At this point, we can close WinImage, come back to our virtual machine, go to Devices, Floppy Drive, choose an image, go to the desktop, disk 0. Now we can do host command and R again to reboot. Once again, it's right control for me. And we're presented with this. Perfect. So keeping up with the steps, let me scroll down a little bit. This is where we are right here. So disk 0 is in the drive. It's now asking for disk 1. So we can go up here to the floppy drives and find that disk 1 that's on the desktop, put it in the drive, press enter. OS2 proceeds to load. Very cool. Press enter when confronted with this screen here. Enter again on these notes. Enter again here. Accept the drive. Enter. Do not format the partition. Enter. This dual boot installation warning is fine. Press enter. And now OS2 proceeds to install. Okay, the hard disk preparation part is complete. So we can go over to our devices and eject the floppy disk image and press the enter key, and OS2 will reboot and continue configuration. We're going to choose install all features. Why not? All the disks are on the drive. Okay. When you get this screen here, just click OK. Choose do not install default printer. Click OK. Choose OK again. Seems like we get to do that a lot. Now it's going to say it's going to begin. Let's do this. Click OK. Installation will proceed. Let's click OK to migrate applications and migrate config sys and AutoExec-bat. When presented with this dialog here, click the Find button. It's going to find all those nice Windows 3.1 applications, so click Migrate. OK to confirm the migration is complete, and exit. And then click OK to modify our config files, config sys and AutoExec-bat. Then click OK again. At this point, we get to put those Windows disks back in the drive. Not all of them, but most of them. First up is disk 1. Press enter, or click OK. Next up is disk 2 of Windows 3.1. Not 3.1.1, 3.1. Next up is disk 5. Looks like it's copying some fonts. And then finally, disk 6. So I think we skipped at least one of the disks. Wanted to make sure we got our money's worth. Great. At this point, we can eject that final disk and click OK, and the system's going to restart. And I'm going to make a big screen because now we're going to be doing our first boot into OS2. Go ahead and click Exit to skip the tutorial unless you want to go through it. Welcome to the OS2 desktop. With OS2 installed, let's get the show on the road and install some networking. Let me scroll down to my directions here so we can catch up with what we want to do next. And what we're going to do is install IBM TCP 2.0. To do that, let's go ahead and put disk 1 into the drive. And what I'm going to do is launch a command prompt, and the way I do that is by going to command prompts and OS2 window. Then we go :. We can type TCP INST. All right, so we're going to choose this base TCP IP for OS2 installation, which is going to be the top option here. Looks like my window's having some problems. Bear with me. And we're going to unclick Install Run LAN Adapter and Protocol Support or LAPS. We're actually going to install something better, MPTS, in a minute to perform this function. From here we can put in a host name, a subnet mask. We can choose a static IP address on our network and our router address. Great. With that, we're ready to install. When prompted, insert disk 2. Then disk 3. And finally, disk 4. Though there are more than 4 disks, it appears that only 4 of them are used. Okay. We're going to get this warning. As I noted, we're going to be installing MPTS, which will do what LAPS would have otherwise done to configure these items. So just click OK here. And click OK to finish that. Perfect. So TCP/IP is now installed. Let's look at our next step. And our next step is going to be installing MPTS. Before we install it, we actually need to convert the DSK images that are provided into IMA files. Despite the fact that these files are 1.44 megabytes in size, they will not open in OS2 natively since they are packed with some special proprietary IBM format. Fortunately, WinImage understands this format and knows what to do. So let's navigate over to our files. Let's find our MTPS disks. Let's find disk 1. I do have all 6 here. We are only going to need to do this for the first 4. We don't use disks 5 and 6. So let's double click on this to launch WinImage. Go to File, Save As, change the type to IMA, and we'll just call this MPTS1.IMA. As you can see here, I've already done this for the first one earlier. That's okay. Yes to replace. Now we can close WinImage. Click on the second disk. Okay, File, Save As, MPTS, and we need to change it to IMA, so we're going to call this MPTS2 IMA. Close WinImage, grab disk 3. Okay, File, Save As, IMA, MPTS3.IMA. Close this again, on to disk 4. You get the idea. There may be a better way to do this, but this is how I do it. Perfect. So with that done, we can now close this. And we can proceed to install MPTS. We can scroll down in the directions here a little bit. And we can see that the next thing we need to do is create a driver disk. So let's go find those AMD PCNet drivers that we downloaded from WinWorld PC. Happens to be this Ether TE1 file, so I'm going to go ahead and extract that to a subfolder. And what we need to do is create an image disk. So I'm going to launch WinImage. And we're going to say File, New, 1.44 megabytes. And then we're going to say Image, inject a folder, browse to where that Ether TE1 or whatever it is directory was unzipped. Click the OK button. Yes to inject. File. Save. And we want to make sure this is not a compressed image. And I'm just going to call this PCNet. Done. Perfect. Let's make sure that's what our directions said to do. PCNet. Yes, we're good. Okay. So let's go ahead and install MPTS. To do that, we're going to put disk 1 into the drive. So we're going to go find those newly created image disks. We have MPTS1, put that into the drive. Go here to this window, A:. I can do a dir just to see what's on there. MPTS is what we want to type to install. Enter. When we get to this screen, we can click OK. Then click Install. Target drive C is fine. OK. Put in disk 2. Click OK. Insert disk 3. Click OK. And finally, disk 4. And OK. Now we get to configure, so press OK. Go to Configure. LAN adapters and protocols, configure. And we're going to choose this other adapters option, and we're going to put into the drive our PCNet disk. And we'll click OK here. Perfect. Now we can scroll down the list here and find AMD PCNet. Went a little too far. Click Add. Come over to the right here, add IBM OS2 NetBIOS. Also add OS2 NetBIOS over TCP. But first you have to add TCP/IP. And then we can add OS2 NetBIOS over TCP/IP. Now, we're going to come down here and click on OS2 NetBIOS, change number. Having some problems with my pointer again, bear with me. Change number, and we're going to change the number to 1 and click change. That's because we don't want two adapters having the same NetBIOS. If we were to click OK and not make that change, it would scream at us. So let's click OK. Now it's going to say that these items aren't configured here. Don't worry about it. Our TCP/IP configuration comes from our TCP/IP install, so we do not need to configure despite what this says. And it's not required to configure NetBIOS either. Just click Close. Sorry, click No. Okay. From there we can click Exit and exit again. Click OK. Click Exit. Great. All set. So now we can do some testing. Let's go ahead and reboot. So first what we're going to want to do is eject the floppy disk. And we're going to type exit in our window. And then we can right click on the desktop and say shut down. OK. And even though we can't see it, this diagram or box in the background says it is now safe to shut down. That's a bug. Host Command R to reboot. Configuring TCP/IP. Let's test it out. Let's launch an OS2 window. Let's try and telnet to my Raspberry Pi. Lo and behold, we're in. So TCP/IP is configured. We can also ping my Raspberry Pi. And that also looks good. Great. With that complete, believe it or not, there's still more networking stuff to be done. Let's look at our directions. Next up, we want to set up file sharing, so we're going to use IBM LAN server to support that. Now, There is a full installation set of disks for IBM LAN Server 3.0. We only need the requester disks. We're not setting up, or I'm not going to set up, a full server. So let's go ahead and put requester disk 1 into the drive. And it has this funny name if you've pulled it from an image archive. All right, so we put that in the drive. And to install it, we're going to go A: and LAN INST. Click OK to continue. It's going to tell you about licensing. Press OK to continue. We're going to do a basic installation. Requester name, I just put in OS2. For domain, I think you can put in pretty much anything. We're actually not going to be using domain. We're going to actually be using peer-to-peer, which will be the next thing that we install. But for now, you can just put in anything for domain. It doesn't matter. Here we can see things like the net program getting installed. We will put requester disk 2 into the drive. OK. Next up, requester disk 3. Click OK. At this point, it greets you with this, and it's expecting you to do a reboot. And looking at the directions, that looks like a reasonable thing to do, so let's do it. So we're going to come over here and right-click on the desktop, or at least try to. Go to Shutdown. OK. Yes to terminate LAN INST. We really don't have a choice. That little window is not going to go away otherwise. And the system will prepare to shut down. It is now safe to reboot. So we'll do host command and R. With the reboot complete, we have a few things to do. Let's go ahead and jump into this OS2 window in the background here and type MTPS or MPTS. Click on OK. Click on Configure. Configure again. Then we need to come over here and find NetBIOS and click Remove. And then Yes. That leaves us with NetBIOS over TCP/IP and TCP/IP. Click OK. Close. Exit. Exit. And OK. And then exit again. Great. Now we get to edit a config file. And the name of the config file is ibmlan.ini. And what we're going to do is change this net to TCP and change this 1 to a 0. This is going to tell the LAN requester to use TCP buoy or NetBIOS over TCP/IP now that we removed the NetBIOS regular. So with that, we can go File, Save, Type, Set, or just press Enter, and then we can go File, or rather double click on the pencil, and then it'll close. Done. So with that, we're all configured for using NetBIOS over TCP/IP for the LAN requester. Perfect. So those were the steps that you saw here and the steps there. At this point, we can go ahead and shut down the virtual machine, and that'll be the last thing we do before we do our next step. So I'm going to type exit, right click, shut down. OK. And the system will prepare for shutdown. And now for our final networking setup item, IBM Peer. Let's look at our directions. So to install IBM Peer, we're actually going to be taking files off of the OS2 Warp 3.0 Connect installation CD. And we're going to use WinImage to help us with that. So I'm going to go over to my files, find my ISO image 430, open it with WinImage. And then from there, navigate to the CID, then to the IMG directory. And you can see on the right here, we have IBM Peer. I'm going to drag that to my desktop. Now I want to inject this into the virtual machine. So what we're going to do is go ahead and shut down here. Power off. And now we're going to open the virtual hard drive in WinImage. So to do that, I'm going to navigate to c:\users/myuser, and then VirtualBox VMs, and then this particular VM, and I'm going to do a star.star in the file name down here to reveal the VMDK file. We'll say OK. I'm going to come up here and say image, create folder, call it peer, change to that folder, image, inject a folder, navigate to the desktop where I have IBM Peer and click OK. Yes. File. And then we can just exit. Done. Perfect. Now we can drag this to the trash. Great. So that covers up to this point. Now let's go ahead and start up the virtual machine again. We can go ahead and launch an OS/2 window. Go to the Peer directory. We can do a dir for good measure. And you'll see that there is a installer called PEER-RMT. Click OK. Click OK to install and configure this workstation. Click OK to say basically we're going to go with the version of LAN requester we already have. Choose Yes to use the more recent version of MPTS. Peer workstation name, whatever you'd like. Click OK. Workstation description, I just leave blank. Click OK. Domain, I just leave it as is. Click OK. When prompted about user groups and access control profiles, I just say yes. That's fine. It can overwrite them. And it's going to say the LAN software is running. It needs to stop it. That's fine. When prompted to backup files, just click OK. And then click OK when told that the configuration and installation are complete. Excellent. At this point, we can type exit to exit this window. We can right-click on the desktop and say shut down. Click OK. Host Command R to reboot. When prompted with the question to create a user ID and password, just click cancel. Then click OK. That's fine. Now let's go test. Let's launch an OS/2 window. Let's do a net use on some server. And actually, best to put in a drive letter, so let's do that. Now if we go to drive Z, we should be able to do a dir, and there are files. Let's try and telnet somewhere. And that also works. So we're all set and we're all configured. Perfect. With networking all configured, I think we only have one more thing to do. Let's look at our directions. And yes, that's installing the Multimedia Presentation Manager, which, in a virtual machine, if you're not using an older version of VirtualBox, is not going to work anyway, but we'll go through it. Let's go. First of all, let's get rid of some of this clutter in our desktop, because quite frankly, we're going to have some same named files here in a second. There we have it. What we need to do is actually extract the multimedia Presentation Manager installation files from the ISO. So let's go to our files directory here and go find our OS2 2.1 ISO. Open that up. Click OK. And we're going to go to Disk Images. There's the Multimedia Presentation Manager, or whatever it's called. Drag these two disks out to the desktop. Great. I'm going to close one image. Back to the virtual machine. Let's go ahead and inject into the floppy drive disk 1. Now we can launch an OS2 window. Go to A:. We'll do a dir for good measure. And the file to run is called minstall. Click OK. Click OK again. Choose the Software, Motion Video, and Sound Blaster options. Click Install. Click Yes. Switch to Disk 2. Click Continue. Using this drop-down, choose Sound Blaster Pro 16. Click OK. OK here for installation. OK as well. These are just selecting default settings. Config sys changed. Click OK. Click OK to finish. Let's close our window here. Back to the desktop, shut down, and restart. Now on the desktop, we should have a multimedia folder on the far right here. We can go into there, and if it did work, we could go to, say, Sound Bites, pick a sound, hit play, and it would play and you would hear something. However, unfortunately, as noted, in this version of VirtualBox, we're not going to have any sort of luck with sound. So there you have it. You could also try a MIDI file. That was a WAV file. We could try a MIDI. And unfortunately, things are not much better, unfortunately. So there you have it. So that's sound. All right, well, that's pretty much what I had for you today. Boy, was that a learning experience. I certainly went down a lot of failed paths before I got things to work. I think the real clincher was realizing that I could use OS2 3.0 settings and configurations in 2.1. Otherwise, it's very difficult to be able to get simultaneous TCP IP stack working with the file sharing like you saw I was able to do. Certainly hope you enjoyed the video. Definitely subscribe to the channel. More great content to come. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down. In future weeks, we're going to be talking about different versions of OS2. You'll certainly want to tune in for those. Ring that notification bell and you'll get notified when those videos are available. Otherwise, that's pretty much what I have for you today. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.